Hi guys, welcome to this webinar on the future of global recycled plastics. This is going to feature one of our clients, Damien Van Leeuwen from Vanden. And those of you who know me, it's David McCann from AOP. So the format's pretty simple, a 40-minute conversation where Damien will give us an overview of where the industry is going, how recycling in plastics is changing, how there's a big investment from corporate, and where Vanden sit in that and what some of the opportunities are. So what we'll do at the end then is there'll be time for Q&A. I've got a series of questions that have come in already. So we'll look forward to this. Damien, over to you.
Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. So Vanden is a plastic recycler and a supplier of recycled plastic feedstock. That feedstock is used to manufacture consumer packaging, cars, electronics, furniture, construction materials, things that we use in our day-to-day life. We employ 100 people across 13 locations globally, including our own recycling facility in the UK. And we recycle over 100,000 metric tons of plastics per year with a revenue over $50 million US. Our mission is to build the world's largest recycled plastic commodities company by 2030. And to get there, we'll manage over 1 million metric tons of recycled feedstock per year. I founded Vanden in 2005 in Hong Kong, along with my partner, John. We're both from Australia. I was an exchange student at the time. And like most people in our business, you tend to fall into it and learn as you go. And so from an initial investment of about $5,000 US, we built it into the business that it is today. And when we initially began, it was very much based on China since we started. The recycled plastic was used as a commodity, as it still is today, but to feed the China demand at that time. But now it's changed a lot, where it's now a global industry where multinational corporations are becoming increasingly engaged in procuring recycled materials for packaging, automotive, petrochemicals, and to the point where we now see the opportunity for an unprecedented amount of demand in our industry. So the demand for recycled plastic will grow over 50% by 2030 to 84 million metric tons per year, which equates to about $80 to $90 billion per year. And that demand has been driven by regulatory changes and consumer demand. And that's important because historically recycled plastic has been used as a cost-saving material. So it had to be cheaper than prime or virgin plastic to be chosen by manufacturers. But today, regulation and consumer demand is changing that. We are starting to have minimum or mandatory minimum recycled content, and the resulting penalties for failing to comply with that are making recycled plastic more valuable than prime plastic, and that's driving a massive change in demands. The chart on the top right is a demonstration of the result of that increasing demand, where it shows two different plastics, PP and PE, in North America and Europe, where the total demand expected by 2030 is 15 million metric tons, but the total supply expected on the middle bar is 10 million metric tons, which is a gap of 5 million metric tons per year in supply and demand. And that's more than 60% larger than the entire market size for those materials in 2022. So that's creating a big problem to solve on feedstock procurement. And the people who need it most, which is the packaging multinational corporations, petrochemical companies, they don't know how to access that or how to solve that problem, that supply-demand gap. And we're in an industry where there's no single company who is recognized as a global leader in what we do. There isn't one company who can help solve that global feedstock issue. And Vanden is well positioned to be that business. Long term, the increase in demand will come from all different types of plastic, but today the majority, not all, is centered on PET. PET is the plastic that's used to produce water bottles, food trays, salad trays, and textiles. On the long list on the right side are the countries who have either made a commitment to or already implemented minimum recycled content in plastics. And much of that for now is based on PET. There's 9 countries that are active today, plus 3 US states that are active from 2025, and there's more to follow in the years to come. Vanden is already actively dealing in 8 out of those 9 countries with minimum recycled content regulation. So we're better positioned than any other company to bridge that supply-demand gap. And the really big ones to note here are Europe and India. India, clearly because of the population size. And you're probably wondering, why is this unique to have this kind of supply-demand gap, or why is it such a challenge around feedstock procurement? And it comes down to the complexities in plastics, combined with the complexity of how waste is collected. Every country is different in how they handle waste. Even different cities in different countries have a different way of handling waste. So if we take the screen that we are looking at today, that's sitting right in front of us. This is a screen made of plastic, but there's actually 4 different types of plastic in this screen. And to be recycled, each of those 4 different materials have to end up in 4 different manufacturing units. So there's a lot of complexity around making that happen, around recycling this screen and then ensuring that each of those products ends in the right location. And we create a lot of complexities in plastics in our lives that solve problems. Car bumpers, for example, that can withstand the impact of a crash. Some people like microwave dinners, TVs that don't catch fire, bottles of sparkling water that don't lose their fizz. To solve those problems takes different kinds of materials and additives, and they end up in the waste stream. So to make use of it again, they have to be collected, separated, cleaned, and reprocessed. And there are hundreds of thousands of those variables. There is technology to solve it, but that has its limitations. You need to know how to detect those variables and understand their impact on the recycling process to ensure the product goes to the right place and you can extract the right value. And that's a big barrier to entry for newcomers. This is really an experience-based knowledge business, which has typically kept companies pretty small, local and regional. And that's why you don't see many global players in this industry and what we do. We've tried to take a very different approach. The traditional player likes to hold their knowledge to themselves and that to form the moat, but it's also a barrier to them scaling. We've tried to systematize our knowledge, create our own proprietary tools around that, and that's enabled us to scale across a wide geography, but maintaining a high level of certainty on the quality of our products for our clients. The US market will have a supply-demand gap on just one material, PET, the material that's used to make water bottles, that's worth over $1 billion per year by 2030. That is mostly consumer driven. The US only has a few states that are implementing recycled content regulations, but if more follow, that number will increase. And for Vanden, we have to be in that market. To date, we've been very focused on building our footprint in the UK, Europe, and Asia, also developing our proprietary tools. We have some history of trade in the US, but it's been managed at a distance. We're now ready to capitalize on the infrastructure we've built and plant our flag in that market. The chart on the right that you see shows the growth in recycled PET demand. It roughly doubles by 2030. So that 1 billion per year opportunity is just on one material. There will be much more value than that can be created with our global network. That there's no company in the US that can match that network today. The growth that the US is going to have, and actually globally, is largely driven by big players in packaging and petrochemicals, and some of those are mentioned here on this slide. These type of companies are coming to us now to help solve the challenges of the future, where they're going to get this feedstock from, including in the US market. And the presence of these types of companies in our market, which didn't really exist before today, it doesn't just drive demand, but it drives a shift in how the industry operates from a spot contract type of business to wanting to have long-term offtake agreements, index-linked contracts. That didn't exist before. And this is starting to flow through our industry, and Vanden is becoming a leader in pushing that through the supply chain. You've got big consultancy firms like McKinsey. They're increasingly researching the industry. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had these kind of studies available. The 1.6 million metric tons of capacity for advanced recycling on the right, that represents just a small snapshot of the planned capacities over the coming years. You can see most of this is in the US. Again, that's without regulation. So the US is a key market for Vanden to be a part of. Some of these investments, if we look at the volume, the typical mechanical recycling plant is going to have 20, 30, 40,000 metric tons per year. The ones you see on the right are in the hundreds of thousands, and that means the investments are in the hundreds of millions. And so the scale is much larger. The feedstock they require is much larger and has to be created from scratch. And to be able to create the supply chain to feed these kinds of investments, you need a very unique combination of on-the-ground knowledge, which is what Vanden specializes in, and the ability to execute across a wide geography. If you don't know how to translate the feedstock in the ground or find the feedstock on the ground into something systematic over a large geography, you're not going to feed these type of plants. What gives Vanden our edge is not just about our reach, but it's about our IP, our data, our pricing models. They're not available anywhere else in this industry. We've developed our own systems to qualify product quality using hundreds of thousands of data points that we've developed ourselves. That's a one of one, doesn't exist anywhere else. And we collect market data against it. So we have a deep archive of product and market values going back years, and we collect more each day. And the reason we do this is because trading companies typically get squeezed on margins as a market develops. But we have two important things that form our moat. Number one is that systematized knowledge. We have a certainty of information in a very uncertain product. And that gives us the opportunity to create industry standards. And number two, we have the ability to monetize our data in pricing tools that internally and externally. So internally, we will use this to develop tools and products using off-the-shelf AI tools to enable our people to make instant decisions on the ground for product procurement, also increasing the speed to market and reducing the cost to serve. Externally, these corporate players that are entering the market want to view the real trends. What happens in different seasons? How does the price move? And they need to use that to inform them what's the feedstock strategy. And Vanden can provide those tools. We can provide those insights. The products you see on the screen, they all, I'm sure, look very foreign to you. These are some example of some of the different forms, some of the different materials that we deal in. But each of those, they have unique characteristics. And what makes us different is not only do we understand what they are and how to measure them to determine value, but we can do it digitally. And we can leverage that data into more powerful tools in the future, even more powerful than what we have today. And as the requirement for feedstock grows, the more feedstock you need, the more that these details matter. Today, we're using the power of this data to our own benefit. We're using it to really revolutionize how we work internally as well. We use it to identify the clients, the products that we can focus on to extract more value. Since the start of 2024, we've been on a bit of a journey to narrow our customer base to focus on those who are aligned to the future market direction. Some of the companies that we were looking at earlier, global packaging companies, petrochemical companies, and we want to use those businesses to transition from being a majority spot contract-based business to a long-term service-based index-linked contract model. And that's led to real growth. You can see on the charts here, what we're actually looking at is the profit we make per supplier and per buyer. The number of buyers or suppliers that we use goes down, and the profit we make from them is trending up over time. And actually, since that chart has been developed, the gap is growing further and further. So that's led to real growth for us, and that will continue through 2030 and beyond. To reach the mission and manage over 1 million metric tons per year, we have to go through 3 distinct stages. Today, we have to leverage what we've got. We have to increase the market share with our current clients, transform more spot transactions into longer term contracts, as well as increase our footprint in the US and India. I'm a big believer in leveraging what you have before you build new. We can grow 30% today just by having access to the right capital. Second stage is leveraging our trading operation to secure a position in the supply chain. We can fund plant upgrades, new equipment, new technologies, or joint ventures in return for long-term offtake agreements on material. And that will be important because as new capacities get built, the quality requirements change, and traditional infrastructure might not be able to meet the needs of those new plants. We can help existing suppliers meet those needs and access that new capacity. And stage 3 is to increase our own reprocessing footprint. We have one recycling facility already in the UK. Increasing our footprint allows us to capture more margin and more control over the supply chain. The position is very open today to become the number 1 player in what we do. Where this industry is going, some of the companies, some of the multinational corporations you've seen earlier, they are building, in some cases, billions of dollars of infrastructure. When we get to 2030, and as we're approaching it, they have a really big issue on their hands of feedstock procurement, and they are already starting to look around, and increasingly they'll look around at who is the company that can help me solve the problem, and they will look at Vanden. And so we can be that company. Really, we could be the only viable opportunity for those companies to solve their supply chain issues, to become their partner to do that. So we're very well positioned as long as we can take advantage of this growth, the industry growth in the next 2 to 3 years. Until now, we haven't really looked for outside investment in the business, but now is really the time to do it. The company is growing. Even in 2025 so far, we've experienced a pretty significant amount of growth, and with access to the right capital, we can accelerate that. The capital we're looking for today, or the money we're looking for today, is to enhance our working capital position. We have to become the best in class on payments. We need to invest in our systems, our data, our tools to automate even further than what we have today and reduce the cost to scale, and to open the door in the US. The US has to be opened in stages. We need to take those first footprints initially, which would be opening Vanden US, getting our initial people on the ground before we then look to do something larger in the years to follow. Thank you. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Damien. Well, I've got a bunch here. Let me just go through. So can you explain the difference in the dynamics between the US market and the European market vis-a-vis regulation?
Yeah, so in Europe, regulation, first of all, has been applied across the region, whereas in the US, it has been decided at a state level. And Europe has already, even the minimum recycled content is something that's just come into force in 2025. But as far as how we deal with waste materials, there has been a lot of regulation in Europe, really for the last 20 years, and that's been ever increasing. The US really hasn't become a high regulation environment. So the big difference is Europe is high regulation. Europe is about, US is about consumer demand, but it is starting to be backed by regulation at the state level.
Okay. Another question here is, can you talk further about the index price? You mentioned that the index price, people are trying to get off spot. Can you just explain, is there an index out there, and what exactly how do you see the future of the index pricing?
So there are pricing services out there. Some of the same companies that would handle prime or virgin plastics also trying to enter into recycled plastics. So we do use those today. We have even used some of those to do our own index link contracts with suppliers and buyers. Really, it's at the very infancy, and there's still a lot of question marks over the validity, because that information is really collected via phone calls. So it is, verbal conversations that are happening over the phone, asking people what their view of the market is. And through asking lots of different people each week or each month, they try to form an opinion on the market. It's not created through data and information.
Why is this so important to the big guys? I mean, like you say, you have your live, like why are the Linden, Basel, the Dows, why are they quite interested in having some sort of index-led pricing?
They need some level of price transparency, rather than, what was the best price that David could negotiate today. They need that level of price transparency, and ultimately in the future, they need to book a future transaction as well. They want to be able to trade on futures, and that solution is certainly not there today.
Okay, thank you. Another question here is, you mentioned that the buyers are consolidating, that you have large players in the market that didn't exist before. So what does that mean? The suppliers are also forced to consolidate?
Sorry, David, could you repeat the question?
The question is the question says, you have mentioned that the buyers are consolidating and that larger players are in the market. What impact does that have on the supply side? Are they consolidating too?
In some cases, yes, but it is much harder to do. So the buyers are not really consolidating. The buyers are becoming larger in scale. So the plants are becoming bigger, the investments are becoming much larger. There is a little bit of consolidation on the buyer side, where you have a packaging company vertically integrating down, but mostly these are new investments. On the supply side, we're not seeing a lot of consolidation in terms of M&A activity.
The question is, can you explain the difference between what's going on in the industry between the USA and India or Europe?
Sorry, David, can you repeat that?
Can you explain the key differences, what's going on in the recycled industry between the USA, India, and our Europe?
Yeah, so Europe, the recycled industry is relatively developed already. It has been getting developed for the last 20 years. So I would say Europe is at the forefront of utilizing recycled materials, if we look at them as the world leaders in recycling and utilizing recycled product. The US I would describe as being 10 to 15 years behind that. So a lot of products that are recycled in Europe are either not recycled in the US yet, or recycled only on a minor scale. And a lot of that is to do with regulation. And the US out of the three has the lowest level of regulation. India, however, as of 2025, as of April 1st, will have the most aggressive recycled content scheme in the world. So in the most populous country in the world, they will have to use 30% recycled content inside of rigid packaging as of April 1st. So that's your bottles, trays, any kind of rigid packaging, your home detergents, for example. And every year after that, it rises 10% until it hits 60% in 2028. And for flexible packaging, it's a bit less, at 10% and 20% by 2028. So India is the most aggressive in that regulation. US is the lightest.
There's a question from me. Are these jurisdictions putting fines on these corporations if they don't meet these targets?
Yes, yes, they are, and they vary according to different places.
Okay. Another question. Do the big corporates and/or the advanced recyclers not have their own balance sheets and in-house teams to support the acquisition of recycled plastics? In other words, why are they coming to you?
Yeah, good question. They try. I have seen that, and they end up coming to us, and it's just a simple matter of, to get this feedstock, you have to have people out there on the ground that speak the same language as the people that collect and process the waste. This is not something that you can do sitting from an office. This is not something you can do by hiring a bunch of interns to do it for you. You have to have credible people that understand the product, understand the industry, talking to the people on the ground. That's the only way, because they require feedstock that's not out there today that's perfect for their needs. It needs to have some adjustments. That requires a consultative approach.
Okay. And then this question's come in is, are you actually looking to build large advanced recycling facilities like the list on the slide, or are you looking to leverage your supply to take positions with them, I guess? It's just the leverage supply.
Yeah, no, we are not looking to invest in those facilities. We're looking to service those facilities with feedstock supply.
Okay, good. All right. Well, let's any other questions that come through? So, and let's talk a bit about your funding. So we're going to go to market shortly looking for funding. I mean, how are the banks approaching you? I mean, this is a sexy sector, right? It's recycled, it's sustainable. What are the banks giving different jurisdictions? How are they approaching you from a sustainable financing point of view, or are they not interested?
Look, they are providing the traditional sort of suite of solutions, things like invoice discounting, different kinds of trade finance. And the challenge with that is they only offer based on the past. If we are going to double our revenue this year, for example, their solutions they'll just never match the rate of growth. And that's typically the challenge.
Okay, great. And then on one of the slides there, you had three groups that you've mentioned in the US. Can you see yourself partnering or doing some sort of strategic deal with any of those three groups?
Yes, that's definitely a possibility. The first step is for us to have our small footprint on the ground first, but it is likely we will form some type of partnership in the US to be able to expand much faster than what we would organically ourselves.
Okay.
And that would probably be off the back of an offtake agreement for one of the major facilities.
Okay. All right. That seems to be it. Oh, hang on. Hands up. What percentage of your revenue, where does your revenue come from? What percentage of your revenue and where does it come from? I guess that question should be, what percentage of your revenue comes from where?
Yeah, so I can answer this in two parts. In terms of where does our supply come from and where do we sell? So revenue for our sales, the majority of our revenue actually is very much evenly split between Europe and Asia. So Europe and Asia would be somewhere around 30 to 40%, Asia probably around 30, Europe around 40, and the remaining is split across multiple jurisdictions. Turkey is the other major market, India and rest of the world. So Europe and Asia are the top. In terms of supply, majority is coming out of the UK and Europe. So about 70% of our supply is UK and Europe.
All right. Anybody else? Any questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, Damien. Look, we're quite excited about this business. We've watched it grow over a year and see the market dynamics. So if anybody wants to learn more about this, either contact myself direct or whoever you deal with within AOP, and we'll give you a bit more about what's going on with the business. All right, guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And have a lovely day.
Thank
Ciao.
you.